What's up, folks? Welcome to the TANKSGIVING Battle Pass and Season. I did actually record this a little bit earlier, but there were technical issues, so I'm having to re-record, so this is where we are. So I'm going to actually read the patch notes on here, and I'm actually going to go through the cards in-game, which is what I didn't do the last time, and I think let's try it, see if it's a little different than usual. So, greetings, citizens. Disgusted by the poor use of steel and machinery by the orcs in the Evil Sun season, the Iron Hands have taken to the field to show what true mechanical might looks like. They've also been emboldened by the news of ancient Terran customs being discovered by the Brotherhood of Mars, describing a holy day named TANKSGIVING. And the Iron Hands can think of no better gift than receiving an armored war engine. With that, we'll get stuck into the balance changes, looking at a range of Space Marines, particularly with a ranged focus, including the 2 Iron Hands in the game. Beyond the Space Marine buff, we've also got a number of impactful trait changes to other factions and a small buff to a Supreme Commander. Now, I was initially shocked by this because, and I'll look at the Battle Pass too, because it mentions that there's only 2 Iron Hands in the entire game, and I swear there are more. Both of them did get a buff, so we're going to be talking about that in a second. And as soon as I heard that there was going to be a buff to a Supreme Commander, my immediate thought was, oh, it's Shadow Sun. Of course, Shadow Sun needs a little bit of a boost. She's the one that's going to be updated. We'll see. Yeah. But just to take a quick look at the Battle Pass itself, this has a lot of super heavies in it, which is really cool, just in general, but also especially appropriate for TANKSGIVING. Some of these, I'm not sure if they technically qualify as super heavies. I'm not heavy support, but I consider this borderline super heavy, although technically it's not. And then as we go down this is a really good battle pass if you like tanks. Very appropriate for TANKSGIVING. And it seems like a fairly generous one, which we're going to see more of as we go into the holiday season. The folks tend to get extra generous around Christmas, so expect some of that to come through. And we'll talk about what's been added to the general card pool at the end of this too. This is another one that I consider borderline super heavy. It fits in your average games, but does have kind of super heavy stats, especially when you get to that higher level. Then we're going to keep on going, and you get 3 copies of that sucker. You get 1 copy of this thing at least. Let's keep on cruising on down here through the free cards. And several of these I don't have. So this is really exciting to get the Predators. So I don't have the Predators. I also, again, consider them kind of borderline super heavies, and it's really cool to see them in the Battle Pass. Also, the cosmetics. I wish I had a picture of these in here because these do such a phenomenal job. So you get this one, and then let's see where the other ones are. And I had the graphic pulled up. Sorry about that. But you get that one, and then you get a door that can be like a closed Rhino door. Doesn't show, and you can't really click on that. And then also you get a banner. I believe the banner's on the paid side as well. You get this guy that can look like a tech brain charging out of a red lit interior. Got that open door here, and then the final banner is actually like the side of a rhino. So it's one of the most cohesive, coherent, this one right here. It's one of the most coherent kind of artistic ones that looks really good all put together. It's cool. I really like it. And now they kind of did that with the race car thing for the previous season where it was all kind of built together in that race car. I liked it, but I used all of the components separately. I didn't use them all together. Whereas this one feels like one that you kind of have to use all together because they go together so well. And one of the things I'm really enjoying about the more cosmetics, I am apparently a sucker for cosmetics, which I never thought I was before. But seeing those, some combinations you run into playing against players are just so good. Like it's a visual combination of things that I don't personally think of, and I see it, and I'm just like, oh yeah. Yeah, so I appreciate that extra flair. Let's see, what else? So we looked at the Ultramarines Predator. You also get the Blood Angels Predator, Furio, which is very cool. The Flamer Predator, classic Blood Angels. The Undrilled Last Cannon Predator, just. Also not sure you could do that with different sponsons. Anyway, it's a really old model if you're not familiar with that. If you're a newer Warhammer player, you won't recognize that sucker. Then we got this one in here. Discipline definitely is a super heavy. That one is one of the super heavies. 12 copies of this guy, and this I believe is the shooty one, yep, which is going to come up later. Actually, he's the balanced one. Yeah, okay, look at that. So I love it when a card has even stats between ranged and melee. Super flexible, and that's very appropriate of the Iron Hands. Let's see, going on down. This one is not a super heavy technically, but it's a really good card. And look at the level that I have of it. The other day I suggested putting this in your Tolmaron decks instead of the kind of the typical Tolmaron stuff because it has that psychic attack and it has melee. The ranged and hit points are actually fairly comparable to the flyers that you usually see, this guy's a sneaky hit, and one of my favorites to actually go ahead and put in my Tolmaron decks. So anyway, because people forget that his ranged is massive and he has a precision shot, which is very good. And then this one, definitely a super heavy. I believe there are enough copies in here to give me a level up of this sucker, which is very exciting. That's an incredibly powerful card for PvP. This one of the cheaper taunts, that will give me a level, the 20 some odd copies of this sucker, which is really good too. Getting me close to that rank. Oh, that'll actually give me up to the rank 3 taunt, I think. Nice. That'll be great. Cool. And then, of course, we've got these standard epics and rares in here. This guy is a really good card, and 10 copies of this will give you a couple levels of him if you don't have him yet. Keeping through here, another super heavy. Like there's a lot in this battle pass, and I wanted to make sure to highlight that. And this one in particular is really scary. Another one you can squeeze into a Tolmaron deck because Tolmaron is so cheap, and that base ranged plus shields is gross. And that's kind of it there. I don't know if I missed anything on the free side. I am going to be activating this one too, just because that's kind of where my hobby money's going right now. So, yeah. So it's a pretty exciting battle pass. Again, has a lot of. It's got a ranged focus, like was said in the initial drop there, but also has a lot of super heavies and some really big hitters that are pretty rare. So it's a cool battle pass if you're thinking about it. Now let's go into the actual battle, the balance patch changes. First off, we've got a Space Marine, this gentleman right here, in the 25-ish range. All right, buddy, there you are. Brother Crucius, Ultramarine Centurion Devastator, goes down 3 in cost, formerly 25. Love to see that, because this is one where, well, let's see what's said here. One of the original cards on release, Crucius has never been adjusted other than receiving Barrage on the trait's release, and this has left him very expensive compared to the other options now available. As an original card, many players are likely to have him at high level, and this may make him more usable in range decks. And I love that focus on longtime players that have these cards they're not using anymore, but have like a high level card. This is like me. I'm sitting in level 12 with him. And that his stats are pretty good, but what I always run into here is the things around in that 25 price point range. Like there are so many better options than him at 25, but now at 22, he's definitely a bit of a sleeper hit, and he'll certainly be more viable in kind of barrage decks. I think one of the biggest challenges with him is he's too expensive to be a filler chaff card in a Tolmaron deck, but he's not powerful enough to justify being more of a mainstay card in most decks. So I'm curious where he belongs. It's obviously an Ultramarine, obviously a ranged Ultramarine. So if you're doing like a soup ranged Guilliman or Akaran, he's a really good piece to put in there. Oh, let's see. Oh, next up, yes, I love it. I love it. And this guy got a massive glow up. Not a glow up because he looks the same. He's still his old self. Boop, boop, boop. Brother Morcar, Legion of the Damned Legionnaire, got plus 10 range, plus 10 base melee. As you can see, that also scales with level up. So we're looking at a 12-point fear card with decent hit points. This sucker is really a tar pit now that can do a lot of damage. Particularly good in Guilliman decks because he will benefit from the increased attack stats and then also still have that decent durability. Of course, good in an Akaran deck because everything's good in an Akaran deck. And worth considering in a Tolmaron deck now because of the stickiness of hit points and fear plus that cost. This is a filler piece that can be very powerful in those decks. And these base stats are high enough that he's even something you could consider in Azrael decks, which is a Space Marine Warlord I'd really like to see and personally get off the ground. Another classic and one of the original Space Marine Fear cards, in a similar fashion, many cards have surpassed the Legion of the Damned since the early game, and where Fear by itself was enough of a unique selling point, his damage just doesn't compete now. A hefty damage increase should give Morcar a much more fiery punch. And I really appreciate that, again, it was both to melee and ranged, because that makes him a non-zero threat in melee. It's not just the minimum 5 to take out an Akaran life. There's some actual damage there. Next up, we got Brother Barakiel, who is in the similar range. This guy right here. A lot of these, it's interesting to see them balanced. I like the recognition of older cards, seeing as they're the ones that people have high level, and if they're falling behind power creep, it's nice to nudge them up a little bit. But then also the newer cards, it's always funny to read these balance patch notes because the single biggest thing about these that stands out to me is that mine are level 3. It's common and it's level 3. Like a common card that's that far behind means it is brand spanking new, and almost no one really has this at a reasonable level. But here, plus 10 wounds and plus 10 range is a significant upgrade. And if we're looking at kind of up in this range, he compares pretty favorably with the Morcar up there, the Legion of the Damned. A little bit more hit points, a little bit higher ranged, both in part because he doesn't have fear to compensate for and have the extra durability, so he needs to be a little bit more punchy. Slightly newer, and by his usage stats, a card that players are trying to use but without much success. And an all-round buff should help with his all-round viability. I would bet, because we recently had a promo code that released the Lion, and Brother Baracula is a Dark Angel. I bet there are a lot of Dark Angels players out there, or thematic players like me, that are putting this guy in because he's a Dark Angel, and it's cool to have all your Dark Angels together. Hopefully this does help with that, because that's something we should be able to do and be successful with. Because I love seeing the individual chapters with their correct colors rolling around the game. Ooh, next up we have a sneaky one. This is, excuse me, I spat a little bit. Sword Brother Teutonus, Black Templar's Sword Brethren. Where are you, buddy? He's kicking around over here, and I got to level up. This is a newer card that leveled up real fast for me. I was a little surprised at the volume of drops I've got for him. But he got -3 cost. While not a ranged card, Teutonus has obviously snuck into the queue hearing about the buffs for Space Marines with black armor, Iron Hands, and the Tech Priests were too scared to correct him. Yeah, I would be too. Again, another card competing with a lot of similar cards, and since his raw stats are very strong, a price decrease seems like the logical place to go instead of a stats upgrade. And again, this is a case where there was nothing wrong with his stats, and he's leveled fairly quickly. He was in a couple free drops at one point, so a lot of people, I believe, have a decent level of him. But the challenge is he doesn't have any ranged or psychic attack. So being a mono attacker, he does have to compete more favorably with cards at the same cost. And at 24 points, you're looking at a very stout field. Even at 21, he beats out this guy a little bit, which is really good. Having that Furious Charge is really good. I personally really like him in my Black Templars decks because I do a mix of Black Templars and Death Company because they all have that black-red motif going on that looks really, really good together. Furious Charge is a really good trait. Yeah, so that it's pretty good. Of course, his stats and trait are a really good combo. Hit points are not bad. That efficiency, though, really does help him. And again, he's one I immediately think of as pairing with the Lion. So another buff who could go well with the Lion Warlord because you need all the efficiency you can get, and you need heavy melee hitters, and you can sacrifice the range for him. So yeah, there we go. Oh, next up we got the Punchy Chaplain, the Punchy Iron Hands, and that is the more cheaper of the two, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go ahead and search for this guy, Furnace. Actually, you know what? No. Iron Hands. Boop. This guy. He's the more expensive of the two. Okay. He's the punchy one. Chaplain. Now we get to the Iron Hands themselves. Similarly, Chaplain Furnace has a good stat sheet, but compared to the other character cards in the 20s, is a bit underwhelming. Space Marines can make good use of regeneration, so being able to bring it on the field for less points should make him much more appealing. And I briefly touched on Azrael. Azrael is one of my favorite warlords in the game design-wise. My Azrael is held back because he's low level, but I love building decks around him, and jamming the field with regen is a really good way to build him up, especially regen with cards that have both a melee and a ranged stat. This guy definitely leans on that melee, but still could benefit from the ranged, and that regen will help him stick on the board longer and build up a better attack pool with the Azrael deck. So I really like these guys. I've been using both of these guys for a long time, but still they did need some love, as those decks pretty much always fell short. They also have the black and silver, so they combo really well with Deathwatch, so they're always really great ones to put in a Artemis deck to give them a little kind of flexible punch and some staying power with that regen too. So love to see it. Next up, we have Malkan Phyros, Iron Hands, Master of the Forge, plus 10 range, plus 10 melee. And you can see those attack stats have dramatically jumped since the last time I looked at him. And I mentioned earlier, this guy's the balanced guy that has both the attack and the ranged and melee about the same, which is awesome. And even better for an Azrael deck. With the stats this guy has now, if you have a decent level of him, I would not leave your Azrael at home with, or leave him at home. Leave home without him. There we go. Already on the cheaper side and with good durability, the main issue for Pharos is his damage output. Keeping his evenly balanced attack stats with his buff should now see him as a very potent option at a good price point for Space Marine decks, looking for a flexible dual attack type build. Azrael. Or Artemis. Again, both are really good ones who can be attack type agnostic. They can be with any attack type, but they do benefit from, improved stats. Next up, we have one of my absolute favorites, this weirdo, Aaman. Severus Agaman, Captain and Terminator armor. Minus 40 wounds, but still, even at level 4, is sitting at a pretty decent pool. And then at higher level, it's a good pool of wounds, even without losing that 40 to base. But then he got plus 10 range and plus 10 melee, which is amazing because he's got that combo of Furious Charge and Precision Shot. I love this card because if you drop him, he can attack 3 times. So if it's your turn, you drop him, he does Furious Charge, he does Precision Shot, and then you can do your turn to do either one. And just like really fun. Balanced attack stats. He's a Terminator, and I always like to see Terminators do well because I've lived through many editions where Terminators were just awful. Decent price point, good hit points. I think that shaving some of the hit points did not hurt him too much, and the damage buff certainly helped him be a more potent card. And I really, really like this guy. Another really good consideration for Guilliman because you want as much efficiency on damage output as possible. And if you buff all of his attack stats and get those triple attacks off, good stuff. A familiar card when it comes to balance changes. The traits were changed at one point, and I was really sad about that. And I think advocated for him a bit, and then he was changed back. It's just such a cool card, and it's such a cool concept to have both that unique trait combo. It's not going to land every time. Like if you're up against a shielded card, you could clear up to 3 shields, which is awesome, but feels less satisfying than some of the other stuff he can do. Because he could potentially wipe a board. You got a Furious Charge, kill. Precision Shot, kill. Your turn, kill something else. Like, yeah. Having settled firmly on his dual traits, or dual damage traits, giving him his unique identity, he still isn't hitting the mark. A lot of that, I imagine, is because he's low level. Like, the bonus of both Precision Shot and Furious Charge really only is felt around level 7, and it takes a while to get a legendary to level 7, and he's new. So we're shaving off a chunk of his impressive health and redistributing that into his attack stats, which should make his traits much more impactful. Yeah, but even here you can feel that base damage increase very quickly. Like his base stats, this is after the +10/+10 base, so his range was just sad and his melee was quite low. So that was definitely needed. Now he definitely does have more hitting power. Still leans on that durability, even with that sort of spray of attacks, but I really like it. And thematically, a Terminator is typically something that's really powerful against, hilariously, lore-wise, very good against hordes of squishy units, like very good against Hormagaunts, very good against Orc Grots. So the multiple attacks help him clear squishier, softer cards in kind of a thematic way in-game, which I like that. Which is funny because really one of the best ways to kill these things is just to drown them in soft little shots. So yeah, a contradiction between lore and rules, but I like that this guy in this game plays very much like he's kind of supposed to. We get kind of a weird change. And not super surprising, but because this is one that never really took off for me, but we're looking at this buddy boy here, Ethaiad, the Wraithlord heavy weaponry, trait change from Big Game Hunter to Regeneration, as you see here. So he's epic, so that's his primary trait. That's the one he'll get up to rank 4. That also gives him the same base trait as this one, who has higher hit points and is more melee focused. So now you have a regen melee, and now you've got a melee or a regen range focused. And I like having both so that you have an option for a regen heavy Wraithlord in either of the 2 deck types, whether you want to go ranged or punchy or both. Because now you have 3 Wraith units with regen that if you have them at high level, you can put them together in a little wall and just really slow down opposing decks trying to take you down. Let's see, a long-standing Eldari card, and that was a surprise to me because you can see mine is only level 4. It's been in the game for a while, but not that long. And even with random drops, I would have expected to be higher than this. Kept Barrage, which is great because even level 1 of Barrage is an impactful trait. So this is a cool card, and I'm looking forward to getting him up to that level 9 someday. A long-standing Eldari card that has always been in the red for balance of tension. After many adjustments to stats and cost with no effect, Ethaiad is having his identity changed a bit with a trait swap. Eldari doesn't lack high-impact damage, so the primary trait of Big Game Hunter wasn't that much of a unique selling point, especially since he's competing with this guy, which costs a fraction as much, has decent hit points, and trades not having a melee attack for having a higher ranged attack out of the gate. So, and also being rare, so it levels up much more quickly. Yeah, so you don't need too much Big Game Hunter in a deck, and he definitely struggled to kind of make headway and be the primary choice, which he almost never was for me. What Eldari does lack is significantly durable cards, and he will certainly fit that bill. A big card like this with regeneration does just that and matches the theme with the other Wraith constructs, which is very cool. Love it. This is probably the most impactful change of this entire balance patch, and I am super excited to talk about it. So we are going to talk about our dear little Shining Spear, who, the Silver Helm here, the Shining Spear Aspect Warrior, got his trait changed from Scout, a melee ready, to Shields. Shields on this thing. I like how the color scheme matches his like white and blue a lot better. I like that trait color combo. Anyway, similarly, Silver Helm has been towing the line for a long time with the lower end of Eldari competitiveness. With a similar approach, we've taken the Shining Spear rule of always being -1 to hit, nice, along with a baked-in invulnerable save, and that's tabletop rules, to turn him into a shield card. Shield is a trait that is very rare for Eldari, with good reason, so we'll see how this one works, but overall makes Azadar a much more viable piece in almost any list. And now this is a massive buff to Lilith decks, because a lot of them are melee focused, and Avatar decks. You don't have a really good melee focused attacker in Avatar that's a little more flexible. That puts him in line with this one. That is 16 points, so is always a tempting shield card to take. And then this guy comes in at 25, so 9 more points. But you get a higher melee attack stat, you get a ranged attack stat, and I believe the hit points are higher too. They're pretty comparable, but the shields, yeah, okay, so they're higher. So this is definitely a really exciting upgrade, and especially in Lilith Hesperax decks, every redeploy resets your shields. So now you have 1, 2, 3 budget shielded cards in Eldari to really build a wall and repeatedly tarp it. Super good with any of the warlords that like to build up attack stats. So Silverhelm could work in a Zephyrblade deck. He works very nicely in Lilith decks, I already talked about. Works very well in Avatar and Rakarth decks too. So basically all of the warlords can benefit from this, except Illic, who didn't really need it. Yeah, this is very exciting, and I love the thematic shout out to the jet bikes being one of the more durable options to take on the table because they have the defensive buff and being -1 to hit and being really fast. So they're hard to hit before you get them where you need them to be. So he's supposed to be impactful before he goes down. That's a change that'll definitely make it, and that has really got my gears turning on how to rebuild some of my decks here. We'll get to those in a minute. All right, and then Servants of the Emperor, and here, surprise, surprise. So I talked about in the beginning, I called when they mentioned a Supreme Commander change, I thought it was going to be Supreme Commander Shadow Sun. Mine is low level. She's a cool warlord with a cool rule that feels very Tau, like that stationary gun line, but I just haven't seen her be very impactful, in part because of level. But the warlord that actually got buffed is Trajan. And when this note popped up, I literally forgot that Trajan was one of the possible Supreme Commanders. And if that's not a reason to give him a buff, I don't know what is. I forgot about it. I literally forgot he was in the game, which is bad. So this guy, Trajan Valores, Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, had his rule changed. And so the way it is, when you're above half health, you do bonus damage. When you're below half health, you get bonus defense. And so there was a 5% addition added to each. It went from 20% increase to attack stats to 25%, and then from 20% damage reduction when at half health or below to 25%. It's a really small change. It's kind of the reverse of the Belisarius Call change, where instead of going down in percent, it went up. I've really struggled to make Trajan work, and I've basically never seen him in-game at all, let alone in the sort of general ladder. And part of why is mine is only level 3, and if you look at this is an 86-point commander. Those stats really suck. I think they're up there for the lowest base stats of any Supreme Commander in the game, and very low even for a non-Supreme Commander, especially for the 86-point price point. Now you're adding on top of that Inspiring Presence, and then you're also adding on top of that his trait. So you're looking at pretty significant buffs to those. So of course he gets really terrifying at high level. And again, those look low, but then if you combine the bonuses he gets and that enormous wound pool plus Furious Charge, he's a very scary piece at high level. But at medium to low level, he's a wet noodle. He's just not good. And so I think he's only going to be impactful as players get him up into the level tiers. But this says, with the buffs to the Lion and Guilliman, both have seen their win rate stabilize and ranked, which is good. So stabilize, not really make a huge impact, but actually be winning some games is good, or some percentage of games. While they are both in the lower end of competitiveness, it's no longer a noticeable drop-off like before. That now just leaves one warlord in that category, so Shadow Sun must be doing okay, which is Supreme Commander Trajan. Given how new Trajan is, we've been more conservative with his buff with just the 5%. However, it should be enough to bring him to that same point of stable lower end competition, which is cool. Just to go ahead and do a quick tangent on that, I've actually been testing him out. Playing this deck with a Inspiring Presence beefy chonky card on the table plus the 5% buff, you can definitely feel it. So this is actually a really scary deck with Supreme Commander Trajan. Obviously very thin, but the combination of shields, regen, and endless makes this a very durable wall. Low card count means you get the cards you want right away, and the double Medicae helps keep them alive, in addition to the defense buff, and they punch really hard. So this has been super fun. I've been enjoying that. I want to see how high it gets with a level 3 Trajan, but yeah, you're feeling that. Getting back to the Servants of the Emperor buffed cards, going into the 20s to look at our dear sweet Urbot. Urbot. 025 Imperial Robot. This guy got plus 10 base ranged. Also sneaking into the queue around for Iron Hands. 025 has taken that description as literally as the Sons of Medusa do, because he's got, metal hands. Metal hand. The other one doesn't count. Not wanting to turn it away, 025 is getting a nice buff to its ranged and enhancing precision, enhancing its nice buff to its ranged, enhancing its precision shot alongside its already durable profile. Good hit points, cheap cost, regen primary trait. This is a solid card, and it's one that I've been using for ages even before this buff, but getting that plus 10 base range does give him a significant ranged attack, which I really like that. I've talked up this card before and how much I enjoy using him, especially I think I've used him in sneaky Greyfax decks. You do like a beefy range deck plus regen, and he's very good if you make it an ultra efficient deck. So I like to see him get a little love. That's good stuff. Tyranids, and this is another one that I think is hampered mostly by just most people not having a high level version of it. It is the Rock Grinder. Rock Grinder. Striking Tendril, -3 cost. That's nice. A potentially attractive option, particularly when looking to fill out a full cults roster, which a lot of folks struggled with in a campaign, I think, a couple months ago. The Rock Grinder is a bit too fragile for the investment, and is a big part of that is straying into the big game hunter range. So at 38, it was 41, and losing the 3 points dropped it just under that, so it doesn't trigger the bonus damage from big game hunter, which helps. It's a stylistically an odd take, because at this points range in 38, you still, and at 41, you get some of the most devastating melee attackers in the faction. You can go just a little bit higher and go up to this guy. At 41 was tied for points, or you can go even a little bit higher to get Old One Eye. This guy, like all of these things kind of get comfortably around that 40-ish points range. And especially for me having level 4, there's just no reason to take this. If I get him up there, a little bit more, especially because that ranged attack. And this still is one that I wonder about, because the biggest appeal to taking this guy is an occult deck, which probably is going to be in your Zima decks. Although he does do pretty well with Supreme Commander Gosar, of course, everyone does. And isn't a terrible option in the other decks too, especially having that balance of ranged and melee. Probably mostly for Zima, and having that low ranged attack base, I wonder, because if you're looking at this, if you want something ranged that can also punch in melee, this is just so much better. So much better. And it's got that precision shot instead of Furious Charge. Yeah, I will say the Furious Charge is really nice for Parasite. So it's great in a Parasite deck to get that punchy melee landing in there at 38, because a lot of the other things that hit this hard at Furious Charge are dramatic. No, they're not. I was going to say dramatically more expensive, but no, they're not. Oh my god, you got to compete with Death Leaper. Yeah, I am curious. I'm still probably basically never going to take this card. I just don't see any. I don't see anything that it's better at than everything else around it, even if I'm doing a pure range deck. If you're doing a full cults deck, yes. So if they're doing a thematic like you can only play cults cards, yeah, certainly I'll take it. But in terms of the ladder and what I'm building balanced decks, especially for PvP, I'm probably never going to take this. And that's a really challenging spot to be in, just because it doesn't really fit anything that makes sense to me right now. But we'll see. I'll keep it in mind, and we'll look at it. Next up, this is a really interesting one, and I have mixed feelings about this change too. Tyranid's got me all kinds of head scratching. This guy previously had the primary trait, or the secondary trait of Barrage, with a low ranged profile. This is similarly a kind of a strange one, where it was a ranged focused card with a crappy ranged attack. This one has Berserk, and it had the melee. So you could have it lean on that melee attack, but also have that fallback of ranged, including the barrage to shoot back if you're up against a ranged deck. I really liked the design of it before. I still do, but it feels more appropriate because the traits changed from barrage to fear. So that secondary trait went to fear. Another card getting a trait change, the Psychophage was a bit of an outlier with barrage when ranged was its lower stat. And while Berserk could enhance this, it wasn't meaningful enough to make a noticeable difference. Moving Barrage to Fear, along with the pairing of Berserk, should make this an extremely potent card in the later levels. But with Fear being the secondary trait, it's epic, only maxes out at trait rank 2, which is less impactful than even a single rank of Barrage. But we'll see. It shouldn't be too oppressive even at max level. I don't see this card being oppressive. I wonder though. Maybe in a Swarmlord deck that's combining that fear with the debuff, throwing a little taunt and some Medicae, this thing could get huge. But it's still competing with the other Berserk cards kind of in the same price range. Like it's 46 for 2 points more you get this guy, which I would be inclined to take basically every single time. And then you've got so many other options in the same points range. This guy just being pure 118 melee for cheaper with higher hit points. It still is kind of a strange one. The fear helps. It does have higher hit points up kind of that level. Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear if anyone out there uses this card a lot and what you like about it. This is one that I really appreciate the design. It's wonderfully weird as Tyranids want to be. So I look at it a lot and then I basically always put something else in the deck. And for me, a big part of that is because I really have taken a long time to level it up. It's slow to level. So yeah, we'll see. This one's going to be a little bit trickier because I'm looking at the cards that have been added to the general pool, and I'm not sure I'll be able to see a lot of these. So we're looking at the Tau. I may have these. I don't. Okay, cool. These two I don't have. This guy was added to the general pool. Great one. I really like that. Decent cost, good hit points, good attack stats card. Love this one. This is a great design space for this thing. As a shaper, as you'd expect. Then we got the Salamander thing. Punchy Spear Salamander thing with Big Game Hunter and Target Acquired. Our big, beefy, high hit points Kroot Target Acquired. This is a really good one in Onva decks. And I really appreciate that sort of Kroot theme going around Onva, but also does tip into the higher range damage in combination with that Big Game Hunter that does make it a very scary shooty card too. Then, of course, we've got Trajan Valoris himself is being added to the general card pool, which is very exciting, especially post-buff. That should help more people get him and more people level him up. Then we've got the Night Killer. This is a weird one. I really love this card. I love this thing. I love that it's just like, it's a knight. It's the knightiest knight that's out there. Big Game Hunter, Furious Charge, super high melee, punch, punch. Love this card, but I can't make it to work because it's 110 points and it doesn't have any way to do with Fear, Shields, Barrage. Or Fear, Shields, and Artemis Lives are endless. So really it just is very easy to tarp it. So it's a big gamble anytime you actually want to get use out of it. You find something squishy you can throw this guy right at, good times. Find something heavy he can punch, awesome. But his use is inconsistent enough for me that I have struggled to find a home, but every time I get a chance to play him, I love it. And that I feel like is how Imperial Knights, peak Imperial Knights on the tabletop in the tabletop game in real life, the ones you can tarp it, the ones you can kind of pin down, where there is true counterplay, those are my favorites. The moments where those knights and those builds have been there and they could be countered that way had to be frustrating for knights players, but it is of my favorite eras of knights. So I always appreciate that. So even when I'm losing with this thing, I kind of have some good memories that make me feel better about it. Ooh, next up, I got this guy at PAX. This is exciting. I got this thing. The Heavy Dreadnought. I got this in the rewards packs that when I got my end of season rewards, this guy popped up. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had him here. This is an interesting one with epic stats, very shooty. Let's get a very shooty, heavy support Custodian, which is cool. And I like to see some tanky stuff for Custodes, so you can run a 400-point full Custodes deck and have some good stuff in it. So that's love the theme. In terms of like what he's going to do and where he's going to land kind of in the competitive deck building, we'll see. It's going to depend a lot on levels. I can't do much with a single level. Oh, and then we're jumping to Orcs. Get this bad boy over here. I may have this one. I do. I got this guy in a drop somewhere. Where are you, buddy? This guy. This guy was a free reward, or I popped up in the store at some point. I really love the Snakebite Clan redesign with all the bones and the animalistic stuff. It's a very cool new take on Space Orcs, which are already very cool new. Not they're just a very cool, unique faction, and I love them to get like an extra aesthetic thrown in there over the last couple of years. Love the targeter squig on the top there. Snakebite Clan Beast Boss, and then I peeked at these two. These are awesome. Let's see, where's the Mandric? I really, really like these. All four of the new Mandrakes. I think there are some others. No, this may be all of them. So we've got Heart Thief, this one. We've got Shadow Creepers, this one. Dream Eater, ooh, spooky, this one. And then I've got Blight Soul, this one here. All right, nice. These are really cool. A combination of stat, like that's an 8-point card. Eldari needs a lot more sneaky stuff at that point range. 8-point card, Furious Charge. Oh, yeah, beautiful. They're just the stats to cost is a really interesting spot. And like this guy, that 9 points, that fear, and that melee, really strong addition to Rakarth decks and kind of your durability based decks. And then this guy, I'd love this one. This one being the double trait of fear and outflank. Really powerful utility pieces. It's going to be a long time before I level mine up, but I was really excited to see them, in part because the minis, the models in the new models are just so cool. One of my favorite designs for a long time, and it's cool to see them make an impact in this game too. Gives you a very different flavor you can run in your Rakarth decks, where you can be all Drukhari and really get crazy there, but still feel a little bit more like the multiple. Um, I totally lost it. I was going to make a cool reference to like, oh, the multiple flavors of the Dark City, but yeah, close enough. Anyway, they're cool. I'm excited. Space Marines. Then we've got our tanks for TANKSGIVIng. The ones that are actually in the Battle Pass are now being added to the general pool as well. Where are you? We got. Let's see where they fall in the price point. Actually, I'm curious about that. I don't have them yet. That's why I'm not seeing them. This one, 55, and this one, 61. Oof, man. So both of those have been added to the general card pool. I still would consider these in like super heavy range, softer super heavies. And this one is gnarly. Barrage and anti-infantry, especially with the buff to anti-infantry. That is significant because even rank 2 anti-infantry is doing 60% bonus damage to infantry, plus barrage, plus a very respectable base ranged attack. That's a scary card. It's a very scary card. True of the bale predators, as they should be, as they have been for a long time in the games. This was another sneaky shock too. This is one I didn't expect to be added in. It's been pretty funny. A quick note here too, if you haven't seen it, there's a new release of Phoenix Lords, plastic Phoenix Lords for Eldari, which I've been waiting for literally 25 years. No joke. Seriously, I've been waiting for plastic new sculpt Phoenix Lords since I started playing Warhammer like at least 25 years ago. Don't at me, I'm old. But yeah, and so it's very cool to see the new models, new plastics, a brand new Phoenix Lord for the Warp Spiders, and then also, hilariously, the Warp Spider models look basically identical to the classic ones, but the other ones all look different and nicely refreshed. Baharoth's design, I have mixed feelings about, the same way I do about Mogan Ra's redesign. It's a lot taller and leaner and kind of spindlier looking, and I really liked Baharoth's old design, but it's still very cool, and I want to see the model in person one of these days because it's a nice looking piece. And I always like that he's such a hopeful, optimistic figure for the Eldari. But this guy is now added to the general card pool with Fear and Barrage. And I was talking about new models because it cracks me up that a lot of the new stuff being added to Warhammer Combat cards is like, oh, hold Forge World sculpts. And you look at these things and you're like, that's old. We're talking like second edition visual design style for Tyranids. Like this sucker looks like really, really old stuff. It somewhat translates to the new stuff, but they're just very strange, clunky looking models. And it is funny that we're still again matching the. It's like you look at the difference between these guys and like these guys. This is a brand new. Any second now. This is kind of the new design aesthetic for Tyranids. It's mixed feelings about it. It's a lot more distinctive, where before they were definitely kind of referenceable to other intellectual properties. But you look at this thing, this is actually a very good throwback. That was a terrible example because this is a newer model, but looks very much like the old school Hive Tyrants. But yeah, compare like this thing, which is a newer, it's older, but it's still a newer Carnifex sculpt to this thing. Very clearly a different era, a different style. It feels a little bit funky and bumpy. Still a kind of endearing in that funky and bumpy old school way. But yeah, no. All right. Anyway, that's it. That's the end of the Battle Pass. I'm pretty excited about this one. I plan to play lots of tanks. Ooh, my arm fell asleep holding it up that long. But yeah, I'm excited to go ahead and get stuck in here. As a bonus, I'm going to go ahead and play a Trajan deck just to see it. Just show you how this one looks, and then we'll go on from there. I really appreciate your patience. I really did want to have this on day of, but between holidays and all stuff going on, it's been wild. Oh man, durability versus durability. We got ourselves against. Ooh, wait, that's the Supreme Commander Vol. Uh-oh. Oh wow, a Supreme Commander off. This is great. I hope other people get as excited about this stuff as I do. This is a very exciting matchup and a really cool one to go ahead and record now. Punch you. I assume that I hit harder. Yes. Well, I get a miracle right off there protecting a shield. This guy fits so beautifully in this trait, having this thing where he builds up, he needs the damage buff early on to kind of get some traction, and then he needs the defense buff later to stay on the board and keep those high attack stats. And so you kind of get the trait bonuses exactly when you want them. And then Celestine, of course, benefiting from the traits twice because she gets them both gets both of them for each life. Yeah, this is gonna be a great one. Braw. Comfortable matchup, and to beat it's a very thematic Sisters of Battle deck. It's not a fine-tuned one, so this should be a very comfortable win. You can kind of see how the deck works. Oh man, look at those miracles. And this guy's now switched over to the defense bonus. Yeah, there we go. We'll try one more because that was a bit of a strange one and very, very quick. I'll take another minute to actually look at the attack stats of the cards on the board. I talked a little bit about the design of the deck, but let me touch on that again real quick. Any second now. I did mention that you've got Trajan's base plus 25% to attack stats. Combine that with a high-level Inspiring Presence, you're looking at 40 or 50% increase to attack stats. So 1.5 times their base attack stats. If you start with decently high attack stats, that's a really significant buff. Yeah, especially combined with that Berserk. And then, ooh, okay, we got another crazy matchup here. All right. Let's go out here. And then just with Trajan, it hasn't triggered yet. Okay. Drop you in there. Should survive that. And this is a really good matchup because none of these have melee attacks. So I can punch them all day long without them actually building that up. And now just to look at these base stats, that's base before his Berserk is triggered at all. And it's still, mine is fairly low level. I'm only sitting at level 5. So there's a lot of place for Strachan to grow here. But 274 hit points, which will be increased because he has that defensive bonus, plus regen, plus extra Medicae. And then she's at an 83 base. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not bad. And her ranged up at 55 is very impactful. That's the thing that's easy to skip over in a melee-focused deck, but having the buffed ranged damage is really nice. This is also early in the season, so I'm not hitting some of the more maybe dangerous matchups, but still, you're going to see some of that. Get Senestia minced with her buffed attack stats, sitting at 16 each. I'm gonna regret feeding this guy some stuff there. Some shooty. And she's switched over to the defensive buff. And so, yeah, you see that significant drop in those attack stats. And that shows you what those stats are without Trajan's bonus. So it is good to go ahead and highlight that. So neither one of them can kill those. So we're going to ready. Give you that range debuff. Bring it on. We're going to lose a Celestine. Oh, we didn't lose a Celestine. Wow. Okay. Now, one thing that has been challenging is, again, Trajan's base stats really suck. They really suck. So you got to be really careful about deploying him until you, I don't mean all the time, but at low level, they really suck. And so you got to spend a lot of time keeping him safe and being careful. But here, obviously, this is a crushing win because I had ranged attackers and he didn't have ranged. So there we go. You definitely feel like he feels like a pretty decent warlord now, even in base ladder play. And this is really early in the season. I'm going up against really easy decks. It's a little bit hard to judge, and I think there is going to be a ceiling fairly quickly. But also because Servants of the Emperor have so many very good flexible cards across the entire trait, stat, and price points bands. I think this has a lot of potential. I said I was going to do one, and this is now my third game, but yeah, you know. Bum, bum, bum. Ooh, we got a melee. Ooh, okay. Little parasite. A scary parasite. I don't intend to lose any cards, so that should help. I'm going to feed you something squishy. Ugh. Sorry, I minced. Oh, God. Okay, there we go. Yeah, somebody else got him, too. Or is that? That's not the one that was just added to the card pool, so somebody had that one before. I want to actually kill one of these when I hit it. I don't want to hit them too soon. So I went ahead and readied there. Oh, yeah, I'm going to regret that, but that's okay. And these, again, this is a fairly low-level opponent. Yeah, okay. Leaf, maybe. And this, I like this. Like, I love the race car banner. It's a great-looking banner, but it doesn't combo well with an actual portrait, where the new one this season with that Land Raider-esque thing going on really does. And that's cool. I really like seeing that. Big shoutouts as often as I can give them to the graphic artists in this game. Like, love the design of it. I talk about that a lot. Talk about like the aesthetics of the Warhammer cards. But the thing about that is those are just the models that come stock out of heavy metal. Those are the things you would kind of expect to look good because they'll look like they do. But the artwork that goes around this, like the backdrops, the portraits, the banners, um, the interaction of visual effects, like your inspiring presence and your fear, like this purple glowy thing, that's all built into this, and that's the design team in Warhammer Combat Cards, and I really love what they do. It's gonna hurt. Oh, it's gonna hurt. Oh man, do I have it? I think I do. Ooh, by a hair. Oof. Yeah, so there you see there's definitely some ankle biting with a low level, or nail biting, pardon, with a low level traction. Um, yeah, so he's definitely held back quite a bit by his pretty bad base stats at early level. But I do think that at higher level, he's a pretty competitive piece now. So I still expect to see probably some buffs for him down the road after more players play him, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it. Appreciate the time. Till next time.